Metal Gear Solid, The Last of Us, Yoshi's Story. 3 games considered by all to be the best narratives ever told through video game. These are what some would even consider to be the peak of the medium, but these games barely scratch the surface of what was achieved over a decade ago by a certain Black Hedgehog. Can you imagine a world without Shadow the Hedgehog? Okay, yeah, sure, this may look like paradise, but do you remember a little game called BioShock? It was nothing like this, but it did teach us one thing, and that is that Shadow the Hedgehog is pretty cool. Since his first appearance in Sonic Adventure 2 for the Dreamcast, where he dies, Shadow has become something of a favourite amongst fans of the series. So much so that he nabbed his own video game spin-off, which was very
disgusting black creatures. Get out of my sight.
This game attempted to act as the buzz brain of the world of the Sonic series, by tying up loose ends of the character and by completing his character arc. By the end of this game, you should fully know everything about shadows, hedgehogs, and the tragic past surrounding the two. However, even after playing this game's 12 or something endings, I kinda lost count, I still have a few unanswered questions. All of them ending in the agonizing realization that I spent money on the PS2 version. However, that was 2005. Oh my god, it was 2005. To truly find out the tale of this darkness-dwelling anti-hero, we need to venture further back, to like the beginning of the year before. 2004 owned, dude. It had like The Incredibles, and it introduced us to the game that would shatter the gaming landscape. Critics were stunned, players were amazed, and I had to pay way more than I should have done for the thing I'm alluding to 16 years later. The greatest narrative ever told in a game. The game that tied up the loose ends of Shadow the Hedgehog, and forever went down as the only canonical interpretation of his backstory. Shadow Basketball. Now, for those who are not religious and thus have never heard of this game, Shadow Basketball, for the most part, is actually shrouded in mystery. Like most holy scriptures, we don't actually know who exactly made the thing. No one is credited for the creation of this game. In fact, it's unclear if Sega themselves developed it, or just licensed it to a third party. Even to this day, this game has only had one re-release since its initial run, that being a year later in 2005. Since then, Shadow Basketball has never been seen again. The only source that had a hand in its development was a distributor and sponsor for the game: McDonald's. Everyone loves McDonald's, right? They made McKids, Meat Paste, those dinosaur transformers, play places. They're kinda banging until you actually enter one and the grease filling the area makes the air thinner. However, McDonald's restaurants were also the only way you could receive Shadow Basketball at the time of its release. And of course, like anyone who has just discovered literal earth-shattering information, they were proud of it. McDonald's definitely made it clear they had a hand in this, plastering their famous golden arches on the game's mold and branding. Oh yeah, speaking of which, the mold. You see, McDonald's and Sega were smart. They knew this game was too good to just be thrown on consoles. I mean, you put this game on the same systems as Mad Dash Racing and Disney Move and suddenly things get a little embarrassing. So instead they developed a new system purely dedicated to running Shadow Basketball. And because of this, the game is perfectly optimized. Those lack of re-releases really meant something. This proves that this is the definitive way to play Shadow Basketball. And they made sure every single atom of this system was carefully crafted. Holding this in your hands is like being in the presence of a divine creation. From one of the buttons resembling a basketball to Shadow's render on the cover art and not even looking where he's shooting the ball because he's just that cool, and the shape. It bears a striking resemblance to the pods Rouge finds Shadow in Sonic Heroes, hinting at the fact that this game is almost like starting Shadow's story again. But this time, it's done right. And sponsored by McDonald's. But enough droning on about the make of the system, it's about time we finally play this thing. This game's soundtrack will go down in history as one of the most influential out there. So as the name suggests, this game contains Shadow landing some sick nasty dunks faster than you can say come on and slam.
This is who I am!
You can move left or right with yellow colored arrows and press the big orange basketball shaped button to shoot the basket, advancing to a new round each time you score 18 points, or 9 baskets. However, there's an obstacle in your way, none other than Omega? Shadow's very own best friend acts as the main antagonist of this game. He'll move to different parts of the court, raising his hands in the air and to block your ball, so you have to maneuver out of the way to score when he's not in your path. If he blocks you 5 times, you lose. Now let me tell you, this game over screen really gives you all the incentive to not do that. A siren is heard blaring off in the background as the two scramble on the spot, and then nothing. The court is completely empty now, and the soundtrack goes silent. It's truly chilling. Advancing through the game's rounds speeds up Omega's block patterns. That is until round 3 when all of a sudden, oh my god, there's 2 of them! Police like sirens when you lose, 2 Omegas, both of them being against Shadow instead of friends, McDonald's sponsorships. This is amazing secret narrative storytelling. It takes the things you know and love about Shadow and puts it on its head, drawing you in. You want to know what's really going on under the cover of this game. Further amplified when you reach round 5, where now not only is there 3 Omegas, but they've completely surrounded the basket, leaving you with pretty much no wiggle room to land those dunks. You have to wait until 1 or more of them have their arms down and scramble to an open space to score points. If you manage to overcome the years of trauma this mind-bending event will bring you, you're greeted with this. Now, if your first reaction to all of this is, "What?" I don't blame you. I mean, people were scared of Angels too at one point, not everyone can comprehend perfection. Playing Shadow Basketball, you would be tricked into believing this game is not all that special and kinda dumb. However, understanding Shadow Basketball is when you can truly discover this game's true genius as the greatest narrative-driven video game of all time. Omega being the antagonist is no mere mistake, despite it seeming that way by the end of the game when you are surrounded by him and his 2 identical copies. However, instead, this is one of the many hints that this game does not take place in reality, but rather the inner psyche of Shadow the Hedgehog. Going back to the pod chip design of the system, when we first see Shadow in this pod in Sonic Heroes, he's unconscious, alone with his thoughts in a cryosleep. Shadow Basketball's mold hints at the fact that this is like a state of cryosleep. Shadow is in a deep mental battle throughout the events of this game, a basketball court being the perfect setting for Shadow's mind palace, as we all know his famous catchphrases, "I'm the coolest," and "Basketball freaking owns." Establishing that this game takes place in the troubled mindscape of Shadow the Hedgehog not only justifies, but perfectly explains the 3 Omegas. The first Omega materializing with its sole intent of disrupting one of Shadow's top 5 pastimes, acts as a metaphor for Shadow secretly believing he is unworthy of Omega's friendship, along with an internalized distrust of Eggman's creations. The Omega apparition is a way of Shadow personifying his fear that his best friends are secretly plotting against him, or judging him from the sidelines. At first, this fear is just a passing thought, something you can get over with ease, similar to round 1 of the game where you face one slow-moving Omega. But soon, this fear grows. It becomes more constant, and just as the 3 Omegas surround Shadow in the finale of the game, this fear of being seen as evil and not being able to change, and his friends viewing him as such, begins to overwhelm Shadow. It becomes harder for him to avoid this issue, shown in game by the difficulty of landing dunks in these final stages. Those sirens on the game over screen? They symbolize Shadow's fear of being caught and killed by some form of authority, much like Maria in his past, which is why the game over is accompanied by a police siren, then an empty court. A court branded by corporate advertising, much like a product. Much like how Shadow was the product of alien biosciences on the space colony arc. However, of course, Shadow doesn't back down. He overcomes his doubt and fears, and as symbolized by Shadow landing dunks with ease in the final cutscene, Shadow now no longer has these fears, and is finally able to exist as his own person, not tied down by the self-doubt or trauma from the past. Shadow Basketball on the surface is a throwaway spin-off game with ridiculous theming that contradicts established canon, but peeking behind the curtain shows that this game is actually a metaphor for Shadow's mental struggle and how he overcame the trauma and doubt from his past, making this the single most important game in all of the Sonic series, as well as completely retconning Shadow the Hedgehog as a viable extension and exploration of Shadow's arc. We can now declare this game non-canon thanks to Shadow Basketball, and it's due to this that in the next game Shadow appears in, minus the ones that he's in that contradict my point, we see Shadow partying with his friends in the locales of Sinbad, which sounds ridiculous, and that's the point. Shadow is making a statement that he no longer cares what others think about him or perceive him to be, because in his head, he just keeps on dunking sponsored by McDonald's. Such a masterpiece of storytelling must not go uncredited. Sega and McDonald's must be recognized for creating such a groundbreaking and well thought out metaphorical masterpiece, and it must be shouted from the... Deeps, what are you doing? I'm in the middle of like a grandiose call to action. Tails football?